What's really going on, everyone? Back again with another episode. We are continuing our candidate series. If you don't know by now, we have been interviewing some amazing candidates who are running for a new office. This time, we are lucky to be joined by someone who I will let them introduce themselves. They're running for City Council in Ward 8, which largely represents the areas of Southeast, including Anacostia, Congress Heights. I will let our esteemed guests introduce themselves before we get into everything.
What's going on, world? My name is Salim Adofo. I serve as the chairperson of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 8C currently, and I am a candidate for the Ward 8 member of the Council of the District of Columbia. I love the way Mr. Noah Lyons just set that up so he doesn't mess up the name. I get that. I'm
That
with you.
was I didn't want to say it and mess it up. You you were smart. I was like, I had never heard
I
someone say
like
the
that.
last
I
name.
love it. I
So,
love it.
we've been doing this podcast a little while. We have a little bit of media training here.
Yes,
So
sir.
I guess the first thing we wanted to ask, you're obviously running in a really competitive seat for the city council. What makes you want to run for the city council now, and how do you think you would be different than the current office holder who's currently in the position right now?
All right, cool. Good question. So, what makes me want to run at this particular moment is I've served as a commissioner for 4 years prior. Well, yeah, 4 years prior to the time I decided to run. And the best you can do as a commissioner is make a recommendation because your role is to advise the mayor, council, and district agencies on matters pertaining to your commission area. They may or may not take your recommendation and execute it. So that's one thing. Two, I looked at what we had currently in our community, and I want to say thank you for your service to the incumbent, but it's time for us to go a different direction, right? We have myriad of issues that I think is going to take different leadership to bring into fruition in terms of, or to address and bring some new ideas into fruition as it pertains to what it sounds cliche-ish, but I would like to call it just back to basic on some things in our community. If you ever ride through Ward 8 east of the Riverside, it's a beautiful community, but a lot of times we see a lot of trash that just isn't being picked up. A lot of city services just aren't being delivered here the way they need to be delivered. And we need to have somebody who can make sure that the executive offices are executing what they're supposed to do in this side of the city as it pertains to city services. Our food access issues, uh, people like to call it a food desert. We have one grocery store on this side of the river that services the whole ward. And I would say that that's just not something that we can continue to have if we want to have a community that not just lives but that flourishes and that thrives. So we have to find creative ways to build up from an economic development standpoint in the community. And if anybody's connected to the District of Columbia any kind of way and paying attention to what's going on, we see a high level of violence in the community, which I believe is connected to the truancy and chronic absenteeism that we see amongst our school age children. So, with that being said, we have to do things to address that. The current council member introduced a bill to reduce attendance from 80% of the school day to 60% of the school day. If you go to your job 60% of the time, there's no way you can expect to gain 100% pay.
That's real.
And think about if you went to class 60% of the time, the good universities, that wouldn't fly,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think that at that point it was like, it's time for us to do something different. Does that mean that the person who's in the seat doesn't care? No. Does it mean that the person in the seat is just an incompetent person? No. But it does mean, thank you for your service. It's time to go a different direction. What separates me from that person is I'm willing to make a decision. Case in point, the District of Columbia Council passed the Secure DC crime bill. The vote was 12-0-1. So that means 12 people voted for it. 0 people said didn't say no, and 1 person voted present, which means abstain. And with all of what's going on in our community, we need you to make a decision. We don't need for you to try to be neutral on this. And that person was the incumbent.
So when you mention like food desert and all of these things happening in Ward 8. Given that situation, what would you say is your top concern for policy-wise regarding Ward 8, and how do you think that you can implement those issues?
Housing, and so let me back up for a second. Public safety would be the foundation for all of these things, and health. And those two are intertwined. With that being said, these things may not sound like they're connected to public safety or health, but they all feed into it because all of these things intersect. And I didn't think of it in this way, but when we talk about the hierarchy of needs and some basic things that people need, this came to me from somebody else. They said, "Oh, that's the hierarchy of needs." Housing, because if you don't have a place to stay, then a lot of other things are just going to fall apart for you. So when I'm looking at housing, we have public housing run by the DCHA, DC Housing Authority, or we may have low income housing throughout the ward. And whew, if you go to some of these places, they're dealing with mold, rodents, uh, broken fire extinguishers, paint just peeling, carpets need to be replaced, broken doors, no fire extinguishers, and some of them, smoke alarms don't work. A lot of the repairs aren't being taken care of. So many of these property owners have infractions. When you go to the DC Housing Authority, some of these places look like the apocalypse happened. We have one unit here is called Marbury Plaza. We have someone who is hearing impaired. This person is on, I believe, might be on the seventh floor, but the person definitely isn't on the first floor. The reason why that's an issue because the safety concerns that this person has as it pertains to like a smoke alarm, when you hearing impaired, you just can't get the flashing light, right? And I mean, the
Yeah.
sound just doesn't go off, right? So you got to have the flashing lights. You got to have a lot of other things to accommodate somebody. So this place isn't ADA compliant. And so what winds up happening is that people do something that's called self-evict. When you can't get the repairs and things that you need, then you choose to just leave. And what happens is that now the property owners take this stuff, they knock it down, they try to build more expensive, more luxury type
Mhm.
apartments. And so the people who aren't able to be in that income level are now stuck, right?
And pushed out.
So if you're looking at housing from that perspective, that becomes a priority issue. So what do you do in terms of policy around that? Right. So
Mhm.
then we could have buildings that are of a certain age be inspected more. Buildings of a certain number of people could have more inspections. So that's a policy that would be introduced. And what does that mean? Just to be inspected more. Well, so now you have the opportunity to have these property owners held accountable because there are more inspections. And then the Office of the Attorney General would have to make sure that they're paying their fines for these infractions, or they couldn't do business in the District of Columbia, right?
So with that said, though, how would you kind of talked about it a little bit, how would you address gentrification? So say if those people that we're talking about, they can't get the inspections, they're pushed out of their neighborhoods, and then these property owners tear it down or build it up to make it high income. We all went to Howard University, and some of our dorms on campus were literally turned into expensive apartments that the students couldn't even afford. So how would you, if you're elected, how would you kind of address those concerns happening in the community?
So the properties that I was specifically talking about are for people who are in the lower income realm. So that's public housing, right? So a lot of the public housing is vacant, is vacant, and some other ones are just dilapidated. So those need to be repaired, right? So that's one way you could keep people in their homes. The other way is the HPAP program, uh, Home Purchase Assistance Program, making sure that we can get people into those programs because the best way to address gentrification is to own your home and live in the community. Another thing that we can do for seniors is to get them tax abatements for people of a certain age, right? So if we can do something to lower their property taxes in that space, that gives them another opportunity because they're in the twilight of their life. They're more than likely on a fixed income. So if taxes go up, their social security necessarily isn't going up, right? When you're on a fixed income, if anything, it typically might go down because everything else around you is going up. So $100 today is not going to be the same as $100 10 years from now if the price of everything went up.
Yeah, that's something I've always been thinking about because I know at least like in like if you bought your house, like in my family, like my grandmother had a house off. I know it's not your area, but she had a house off Benning Road, and she bought it in like the 70s, and obviously the value of the house then is certain. She's not longer in the house, but the value of the house then is certainly not the value of the house now, and I can't imagine the property tax difference. Can you at least speak a little bit more about like how you could use that as a vehicle to like actually keep people in their homes? Because I think to what we've experienced, it's like, it's one, the seniors who both, are living off Social Security, but it's also just the person who said, you know what, I had this job and I could afford this house at this time because the property taxes were this. And now 10 years later, I have to pay some property tax that I just didn't sign up for. And then I'm like basically forced. So can you talk about how, at least from your side, kind of that economic tax piece can at least incentivize people to not leave? Because a lot of times I would
Right.
assume that people are just leaving because they can't pay the bill, which is not even their own fault or the
So
tax bill.
let me correct you on something. When
Please
you become
do.
a council member for the ward, well, I don't want to say correct you, but just give you a
Hmm.
different perspective.
Yeah.
You vote on things that pertain to the entire city,
Hmm.
not just your ward. So yes, I would be elected in Ward 8, but I would be making decisions that impact Ward 7, Ward 1, Ward 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So not in theory, practically, you're a council member for the entire city because you also vote on a budget that impacts the entire city. Now, as it pertains to keeping people in their home with taxes, we have to look at each situation differently to see what the specifications of that are. But when I'm thinking about something for people in a certain age range, for example, or people that have maybe been living here for a certain number of years, right? So maybe if you've been in your home 30 years, which makes you a long time resident and that you have a vested interest in the city, then there can be some tax breaks on that end. Somebody that may have just moved in 90 days ago and just bought a house probably wouldn't necessarily be able
Yeah.
to qualify for some of these things because you haven't invested in the city. So if you've invested X number of tax dollars, then you should be able to get some kind of a tax break in that space. And that can be something that can keep you in your home.
It's good to hear how like you have these actual plans to prepare and spend the city's budget. We've kind of noticed crime a little bit increasing in DC. Ward 8 especially has like suffered from gun violence. What would be your plans to fix the issue, and how do you plan to balance public safety with police accountability?
Listen to this. This is something that I think is very important as we transition into different stages in our lives. I'm going to guess all of you all are under the age of 35, right? And so,
We're just there. We're just there.
okay, discipline and structure are not punishment. And what I mean by that is when you go into an institution that you may work at, you want to know what your role is. You want to know what day you get paid, how much you get paid, what your job description is, what's the policy for when you want to take leave. That's called structure. When you don't have those things, you just like, man, what am I doing here? Like, don't nothing work the way it's supposed to, and it's frustrating. It's confusing, right? Discipline and structure in our community is the same way. We gotta have a code of conduct that we operate by, and when you violate that code of conduct, then there can be consequences for that. Sometimes when we have the conversation around public safety, it starts and stops with the consequences for violating our code of conduct. We should be respectful to each other, right? But sometimes we're not. And when we cause harm, because people may have intended to do something different, their impact and their intent don't always match up. So, as it pertains, I say that to preface my comments around public safety. If you do something to harm someone, you should be held accountable. At the same time, we need to make sure that you have the resources that you need so that you can be safe. So if someone is attacked, for example, carjacked by somebody 15 years old, does that 15-year-old person deserve to go to jail for the rest of their lives? I'm going to say no, but that person should be held accountable, but also get the resources that they need for us to figure out why are you doing this at this young age, for one, and then two, what's happening at home that would allow you to figure out some kind of way for you to use your free time to go and harm somebody. And so we got to get you those kind of resources, especially to your family. We have a lot of carjackings that's taking place 2, 3 in the morning sometime by somebody 16 years old. At
I
16
mean,
years old,
yeah.
you shouldn't be outside at that time of night. So then what's happening to your family? And when I'm thinking of public safety, I'm not only thinking of, well, let's stop crime, right? So we're talking about consequences. When I'm thinking of safety, I'm thinking of all of the resources that you need to help you become a whole person, to make you feel safe, right? And so discipline and structure are the things that help you feel safe.
Do
I
you
have
think
two.
that
No, go ahead,
another,
man.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Mackenzie.
Do you think like something like youth programs or maybe after school programs or anything around that sort could combat this as well? Or, why is a 16-year-old out at night? How do we address this in ways of like programs? Do you think that that's any possibility to the policies you're focusing on?
It helps. And to be honest, they are there. Were you all stealing cars at 13, 14, 15, 16? So think of the things that was happening in your lives, right, that led you to do something different than that. And I'm going to be honest, we are in a chaotic space. TikTok can put out a challenge to steal cars, right? How many young people are on TikTok learning that? Not most. I'm not going to say and tell you all. I'm not going to say most, but enough are doing some of those things. So no matter how many programs that are in existence, if the culture that we have in our society allows us to do something different, then we got to combat that culture. So there are programs that are available. There are recreation centers that are open. There are mentors in the neighborhood. But if it's no longer, if that's not the cool thing to do, then all of those things, go to waste on that end, right? So we all probably had a class clown at school, somebody that was just seen like that person just wanted to do mischievous things to get attention. And we see how that story played out for some people. It took something drastic maybe for that person to turn around.
What do because I think given that you had mentioned earlier that obviously the council had passed the crime bill, as someone who is actually in Ward 8, how do you, because I think you have a very nuanced kind of view, I think, in terms of how crime relates to public safety, how public safety relates to education, I think you broaden it out to where it's not just this one thing that you want to focus on when you mention public safety. Given that, you would represent Ward 8, how do you balance that in conversations where you would talk to other council members who represent largely white areas where they just see it as crime and then punishment? How do you justify where I think obviously there have been a lot of talk with other folks, and I'm just even thinking the white folks that I talk to in the city where they say crime is up and I just want these people to go away. And you don't think that way, but that's clearly the shift I think that is happening within the city in terms of how people are responding to this, whether it's happening to them or not. How do
Right.
you balance that? Because then I think from my perspective, it's like, yeah, you might live in Ward 1 or 2 and you're talking about crime, but crime is not actually around you. And you have a perception of something that is not actually real in front of you, or that you're forced to address as you would have to as someone who's in Ward 8, who's in Congress Heights, Anacostia, all these other places. So how do you think you would balance those conversations? Because I think from where you are, clearly the ball has gotten very far from you in terms of the conversations that we're having in terms of crime or
So
public safety. But how do you think you would handle that as someone who's actually, I think, trying to do something different in this space?
the crime is spread throughout the entire city. So you've had a Ward 3 council member get her car stolen. So with that being said, like everybody's feeling it across the city. So now it's not just, oh, that's them Negroes over there in Ward 8. We gonna let them do whatever they gonna do to themselves. That's just amongst them black folks. Now everybody's feeling it. And
But do you think everyone is feeling it proportionally? because I think that's my thinking behind it, is that you might, of course, yeah, your car might have gotten broken into, but to your point, there are these other structures, to what you were referring to earlier, my perception of it. There are these other structures and disciplines, as you mentioned, in these other places that would not, when a car gets broken into, yeah, it might just be the random one off and that just happens, but there's not these other things in terms of violent crime, in terms of all of these other things, or
No,
a
I got you.
systemic issue. But what would you say to that?
So to that end is that the poverty in the city is concentrated in Ward 8
Mhm.
and in Ward 7, parts of 5, and
Yep.
parts of 1. So with that being said, we got 13 council members. Each ward elects a council member specifically for the ward, and then you elect 5 other council members who are considered at large. So each ward is electing a total of 6 council members. It's 13. So you elect half of the council in each ward, and you elect the mayor, and you elect the attorney general. So each ward is electing 8 leaders to govern this city, and you elect the delegate at the federal level. So you're electing 8 people out of 16 that get paid full-time salaries to govern this city. So you're electing half of the city's leadership. So it's not going to be a world of people may not really understand or know what's going on. It may seem like that, but it's not. So that's one. And then two, because the poverty is concentrated by default, a lot of the things associated with poverty come to that. And so to your question on that end, we see it. They see it. So it's not like they can't escape it because they see it. We got Kilmo News or we got Washington Probs, right? Folks are using social media to tell this story now. So you can't not see it. And on top of that, each council member is on several committees that impact the entire city. So when we have these conversations about how we can address these things, they see it all throughout the budget process as well, and the agencies that they oversee. Agencies just don't exist in one ward, they exist to serve the whole city. So all of those things is there. The nuance to what you're discussing is what type of cachet do you bring to the table to warrant the respect of the other council members to get them to buy into your proposals to improve your specific community or whatever legislation you want to push for the entire city. And I think that for someone like me, the power would be in the amount of people I can mobilize around these issues. Right. So I tell people all the time, if you can write 3 paragraphs to vent on Facebook, on Instagram about something, copy and paste that and submit it as testimony. Right. Get your voice on the official record. When I'm looking at the records of who testifies around a lot of issues in the community, I don't typically see as many residents from Ward 8 as I do from other spaces. So we got to get people who are engaged in this system. We got to get people engaged in the system. Politics only works if you engage in it. But if you don't get involved, you know how this goes. If it's not written down, then it doesn't exist.
That makes sense. Getting more people engaged. So like, how are you actually doing that? Reaching your people and like when you travel throughout War A, I'm sure we scheduled it this early because you're gonna knock on doors after this. How are you
Yes.
engaging with residents and like what are their main concerns or issues and how are they wanting to be helped? Speaking of it, again, engagement.
So we can knock on the doors, we can send text messages, emails, post stuff on social media, tell people to come to community meetings. I tell people don't opt out of the email, don't opt out of the text messages that we send because now you're not going to get information. Right. So you got to get engaged. We can only go to so many doors. Right. I sent a mailer, it cost $5,000 to send a mailer to 9,500 people. I can send 10,000 text messages for $500. But if you opt out, you're not going to get this information. So I got to send messages every way I can. Every time there's a new social media platform that comes out, gotta use it. I got TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, Twitter, Nextdoor, Snapchat. I still got MySpace, LinkedIn,
Black Planet.
Black Planet, Reddit,
Don't you?
right? Every time there's something new that comes out, now you got to use it, right? I got to
So,
spend the first hour of the day posting the same message 10
30
different
times.
places, right?
so what
So,
are they saying when they what are they asking you to do and help in their community?
so many, similar to what Henry was asking, many of the issues that people have, I'm gonna be honest, are public safety. Some is around housing. Some folks just really just need help with a myriad of issues that you wouldn't even imagine. Like someone called me one morning. This was during COVID, and she said that the school isn't open. It open at 8:30. It's 8:25, and I gotta be to work at 8:30. Can you get the principal to open the door so I can let so they can let my child in? I'm like, you calling me at 8:25? Like, you really think I'm going to call a principal and get this principal to open the building up just so your child can get into school so you can get to work on time? I mean, I didn't say that to her, but I'm sitting there thinking, it's like, hey, I'll do my best, right? By the time we finished the conversation, it was 8:30. Door was open. So that's something that's a little extra on one end. But then on the other side, it's, hey, we need to address issues of, I want to start a nonprofit. Like, how can you help me do that? And then everything in between. But I'm gonna be honest, the biggest issues that I hear from people, around public safety or the quality of the place where they live at is just not where it needs to be. And then it causes health issues. So if you're living in a building and it has issues with mold or rodents, a lot of these things impact a person's health. I had one constituent. She was hard of hearing, and she had a daughter, and they had a lot of issues with rodents, and it was in the carpet. And so, as her child was eating some of the stuff off of the carpet, um, and it got into her food, and her daughter got sick. And she just wasn't like intentionally eating rat droppings, but you know how children can drop food, pick it up, and eat it. But because of that, the infestation of rodents, it got into her food. But she's also hard of hearing, so now it's really complicated now to try to address these kinds of issues. So when I tell you that the quality of housing impacts safety and health, it does. Respiratory issues. We have a large number of children with respiratory issues, in this ward because of the mold.
How do
Because
you
of
feel? Oh, no, no, go ahead, please.
I was
Finish.
also
Finish your
going to
thought.
say because of the amount of traffic, that we have, in this side of the city, just in terms of the highway being right here. Many of these buildings aren't where they need to be from an environmental justice standpoint. They're not hitting the code. And so then the air pollution, the air quality is really bad, which then leads to respiratory issues as well.
As someone who's on the advisory commission, like, how do you feel like that experience has prepared you? Because I would say, when hearing you talk, and I think us kind of having this conversation, it's obviously you're really good. We joked about how you're on 30 different platforms, but that gets to a level of, I think, engagement that you have that is clearly tied to kind of your former roles and service. How do you feel like that experience has kind of prepared you to take a larger role on the
My
council?
hair was black, right, before I became a commissioner, and now, it's a completely different color. It's prepared me to get me to understand, I think, the biggest part about being a politician, and that is convincing people that don't agree with you to agree with you.
What do you
And you got to
go ahead?
I don't got to convince everybody. I just got to convince enough so I can get the amount of votes that I need.
What do you think would be the hardest part of that, of trying to carry that forward? Even, obviously certain parts that you represent now wouldn't be the parts, your territory would increase in your district. What do you think would be the hardest part of that as you're trying to establish relationships with folks that you didn't have to on the advisory commission?
Money and ego would be the hardest part. What I mean by that is People want to get reelected, and they need money to get reelected. So if this issue that you're pushing doesn't sit well with the people who fund them, they may not want to support it. Or people may have bigger aspirations for things. And if this makes you look better than them, that's something that you have to try to overcome.
All right. We love that. So now we always like to end these conversations on kind of like a higher note, where we do kind of some rapid fire.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So I will start off. You mentioned earlier how you have all these social media apps. Which one gives you the biggest headache in terms of whether you get the most angry responses or the one that gives you the most trouble? Like if you're posting the same message, which one are you most likely to get the person who is going to send you a long, lengthy response? As someone in politics, I'm very curious about this.
Facebook.
I figured that would have been. It was either Facebook or Reddit for me. I couldn't tell because if you're commenting on something on Reddit, oh, you're really into it. So I'll let the next person.
What's the craziest thing someone has said on Facebook to you?
Somebody's put my home address and personal phone number, and another elected official, and told people to come bang the hell out of my door.
Oh
Did
my
anyone?
God. Are you scared? Or like, how do you even respond to something like that?
I can't tell you.
Okay.
Well, we pray for your safety, brother.
Yes.
You don't
Me
need
too.
another. That's crazy. I heard you're a member of a certain fraternity. Would you like to inform our audience of that fraternity?
That's not a rapid fire.
Yes, I am a member of Pi Sigma Alpha, the National Political Science Honor Society.
Come on now, brother.
I am a member of the
You got me out here looking crazy
Pi
now.
Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated.
There we go. There we go.
I was hoping he didn't take the bait. I was like, we got a clip right there.
Look.
Didn't land
No,
out Henry's
seriously. But okay, no, seriously though, what has been like your favorite thing or most favorite thing while running and doing like the campaign and knocking on doors? What has been the most rewarding part of that for you?
Learning more about myself. You go through this process, and just last night I was having a conversation with the team, and we were talking about somebody who was a really close friend of mine who was working on the campaign also decided to step away. And the impact that when you're in leadership, the impact that these emotional roller coasters take on you. And I had to really dig deep in myself and learn how to navigate these things and how to cope with it. And I believe that it makes me a better person, because in spite of all of the things that I think were done wrong to me, I got to say, you know what? I got to be able to forgive this brother, forget it, not forget it, but forgive. And then we got to move on. Right. And then when you go out into these other spaces where you got to deal with a lot of other people, I say, okay, I can't take this stuff too personal. What's at stake? That's the most important issue. And that's tough, because our egos, a lot of times, when somebody do you wrong, we in cancel culture now. The minute somebody do something we don't like, it's, oh, we cutting this person off. We're going to ghost this person. We blocking them. You can't do that when you're an elected official. So all of the personal things that I've had that didn't go my way, I had to really learn how to navigate those things, how to cope in that space, so that when I'm step back into these leadership positions, you got to lead. Most of the world's not going to agree with you. So what I'm supposed to do? If I got to deliver resources for maternal health to Miss Marshall, and I broke up with my girl, but she's a maternal health expert, right? Then we got to figure this thing out. And I got to be able to convince her, look, I know we had some issues going on, but you are the top maternal health expert in the city. Let's overcome whatever issues we have, because I got somebody who I got to help overcome this issue. Or if I got a homeboy, that's an expert in mental health, but we fell out, I got to figure out what's these issues we got to work on, because we got a whole population of young brothers who are going through something and they need somebody to talk to, right? We gotta be able to overcome whatever personal challenges we have so that we can better prepare ourselves to lead. And I'd close on this. When we're looking at leadership as an elected official, policy for sure, budget for sure, oversight over these government agencies for sure. That's what you're legislated to do. But there's another aspect of leadership that's required of you that's not on paper. And that is to leverage the authority and the responsibility you have to inspire people to do better. People cannot rise to low expectations. They can't. So you got to raise the bar to a standard of excellence. And a lot of times, most of the times, that means overcoming whatever personal challenges or hangups you have with another person. So like the person who put my information out on the internet and compromised my personal safety, I have to be able to say, well, look, this person is elected until this person is not. So to that end, how can we figure out how to work together to improve the community? We might disagree on 95 things out of 100. And so I can't walk away from that person being like, man, we just disagree on all this other stuff. I got to say, here are the 5 things we can work on. Let's work on these 5 things. And I'm going to tell you, that's a very hard thing to do because people oftentimes that you disagree with can piss you off to the highest of festivity, but you still have to figure this stuff out. And that's something is very challenging.
Hey,
I can
you
imagine.
talking about my biggest challenge of the year, working with you too. I'm just playing. I'm just playing. I'm just playing.
Whatever.
Think about this interview Shannon Sharp just had with Amanda Seals. He said, I know these people. Now he got to go back to some of these same people he know and he have relationships with, and they're gonna look at him crazy because he had this person on his platform tearing them down. And you're gonna be like, Shannon, I thought you was my friend. I thought you was my man. How you allow somebody to do that to me? Now he got to figure that out.
Once I saw that interview was 3 hours. We don't do that on this platform. We ain't got that much to talk about.
We do, but we're gonna save it for after the election.
Exactly. We'll get it to 45 minutes, not 30. So we appreciate you having you on. So for the folks who are throughout the city, who are in Ward 8, or who are listening to us across the country, across the world, let them know where they can connect with you on social media. Also get and find out your top issues on your campaign website.
So my website is salimadofo.com. And you can find me anywhere at Salim Adofo. And you can donate there. You can set up the volunteer there. You can read my bio, see all the nice, pretty pictures I got that I using to try to impress people. I wanted to be a stand-up comedian, but I didn't think I could tell enough good jokes for more than like 30 seconds. So that career option just went straight out the window. But go to my website, check it out, and get engaged and get involved. And I never tell people, look, just vote. That's like me giving you a gun and saying just shoot without a target. Vote for me. Donate to me, right? Vote for Salim Adofo. Donate to Salim Adofo. You will be making an investment in yourself and your family and for your future.
I love that. So on that note, we appreciate. Yep. No, go ahead. Finish off.
I'm just gonna say, hey, I'm here for service, to humanity. Right.
There it is.
I want to have a culture of service. I want to value your time. So on that note, I love you all. Thank you.
I see what you did there. I see what you did there. I see what you did there.
You caught that, right?
But we appreciate it. Yes, please. We appreciate it. So for all those, be sure to catch us on all of our social media. That includes Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at WRGO Pod. Be sure to like, listen, subscribe on all of our streaming platforms, wherever you listen to podcasts via audio, and where you can catch this full interview, where you can catch the 4 of us actually talking on YouTube. So thank you.